the goal is to make this a conversation as opposed to us speaking at you or teaching you in quotes, because I always feel like there's a lot to learn, right? So even with us, we can learn from you, from your experiences as a beginner, or from the challenges you're having, or maybe even from some of the successes you've had so far. So we might throw some questions back at you. We might want you to ask questions or just interact more with us, tell us about specific case studies that we could go deep into, and maybe even talk about as well. That would be nice for this conversation. So I'm Hillary, and I'm currently in London, but I'm from Nigeria, and I've been a UX researcher for about 5 years. I was a market researcher before that, and I think I mentioned this before, but why I do this is to actually, I mean, sure, I love sharing the information I know, but the main reason I do this is to learn as well from people's experiences and to know what people struggle with and how I can incorporate that into my own goal of helping people learn better about user research, even people that don't necessarily or aren't necessarily UX researchers. But that's about it. Iwalola, can you intro yourself as well?
Hi, everyone. My name is Iwalola. I am a UX researcher, blur the lines as well into products and then also into markets. And yes, I am in Lagos, Nigeria, and I've worked with all Nigerian companies, I guess, since the start of my career. I don't think there's anything interesting right now.
Okay, I guess I can go. And also, just to layer on top of what Hilary said earlier about these calls, before we were going to do like large webinars and everything, and we talked about them, it's like the first one we had was very small as well, with just a few people, and it was a very beneficial conversation for everyone. And so we have decided to also just keeping it small, so it's actually where we can actually have discussions instead of just like somebody just talking at everyone. And with that said, I'm Lade. I've been a UX researcher for this year makes it 9 years, which is wild. But yeah, I'm originally from Nigeria, based now in the Netherlands, and yeah, I guess I've worked at a bunch of different companies that target customers all over the world. So I've pretty much been doing research for all over the world, I guess, for a while.
Okay, so Lade and Iwalola, and I'll do this as well. I want you both to sort of set the scene and describe what type of situations or when exactly you do user interviews. And you could give like an example of maybe case study you had where it was between user interviews and something else, and user interviews was a clear winner, and why. I think that would help us also understand why it's important to do user interviews.
Okay, let me go first, I guess. I can talk about a recent time. We noticed something. We noticed that certain types of businesses or business people don't want to get a POS device. And I'm talking about where I currently work now at Money Point. I'm just giving as much information as I can. So we noticed that, and the question was like, what is it about these people? Why don't they want a POS device? Like, what's going on? Is it their business? Is it that maybe their business isn't big enough? Is it that our product is the problem and things like that? So of course, if you ask anyone, I guess, who's not a user researcher, they wanted to like put out a survey, and I'm like, yeah, cool story. A survey is not going to tell us what we want to know. So basically, in that circumstance, the question was, do we find out why these people don't have a POS device, like a payment device, why they don't feel the need to have one for their business? And is it an us problem, or is it their problem, or something else? Or is it our product that has the problem? So yes, sending out a survey could help you get some insights, but in this specific instance, it would not have helped us understand what we wanted to understand. So we wanted to know, what is it about these people that makes a payment device for their business not valuable for them? So if we had done a survey, we probably would have asked, why don't you have a POS device? Now, challenge to the survey is a lot of the time, unless people feel very personally impacted by a problem, and not even just that, because of the way people behave currently online, especially if it's like an online survey, the major challenge is that you will not be getting in-depth insights. We wanted to understand their behavior. A survey just would not have helped us do that. So with interviews, we were able to basically do some segmentation, figure out who are these people, what are the general characteristics that make up these groups of people who don't have a payment device. And we recruited internally. We worked with an agency as well to recruit for this. We sat down with these people, and the information we got, so valuable. We did a lot of recordings. We put some of the clips in like our in the reports. I know there's conversations about whether researchers need to write reports or blah blah blah, but we shall had all that in the reports. And it's been so impactful, like sharing that out with the various teams. They're able to get, you're able to feel like you understand the person better with this methodology, which is user interviews, as opposed to a survey. So, yep, I think empathy building, user interviews helps with that. Of course, there are better ways to also do that too, but we're talking about user interviews today. So, yes, that's one instance.
So yeah, I think user interviews are actually one of my favorite methods because of how they you can expand them to go many different ways and incorporate many other methods into them. So you could go to a customer or a user or a potential user, or they could come to you, and in the midst of your interview, you could also do card sorting. You could do participatory exercise, design exercises. You could do so many different things. You could even do like mini polls within your interview. So even though like the catch-all term is user interview, and most times people think of just asking someone a question or asking someone questions and they verbally give a response, I found interviews to be very flexible for different kinds of things, really. And there are many instances where I will choose interviews over many other methods for the reason that I just said. Because, for example, if I want to understand, let me use my most recent place of work. So, working with hotels, that's what the company does, offer training for hospitality specifically. And so we want to understand, okay, what are the issues that they have? And the research goes beyond just the platform. It also goes into like, what kind of content do we need to produce? Where are the training needs? So all these kinds of things you get more from interviews, especially when you interview in the context of the user, which is also something that I find to be very, very useful. Excuse me, beyond just doing virtual interviews, which can also have their own points of views and value, but depending on the goal that you have and depending on the kind of research questions that you have, I found that interviewing and to kind of answer your question, Rukayat, is also, which is about do you think is most impactful to meet the customers physically for interview or set up an interview online? It depends on the goal that you have and the kind of research questions you have, because I've also found value in doing what's it called, virtual interviews, especially when you want to do things like incorporating elements of like usability testing into your interview. Virtual interviews work. I prefer them for those kinds of situations, but for situations where the research goals are more exploratory, more curious, more like, what should we do here? What's the problem here? I prefer to go to where the person is, where you can observe other things outside of what they're saying to you, the context of the environment, the work that they do, how they handle whatever the challenge is, blah, blah. Yeah. And then if it's around the context of a particular tool and how they use the tool, then again, I prefer virtual interviews in that instance. I don't think there's a like right or wrong way. It just depends on like what you want to find out.
My laptop froze for a second, but can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I say though that it also depends on context and nuances. So while in this day and age, it helps to know how to do both, because if you're working for a company that has different target audiences or different markets, then surely you should know how to do virtual interviews. And if you're working for a company that, for example, targets rural areas or underserved people, in most cases, these individuals will not really know how to, for example, do a virtual interview. So you have to go meet them where they're at. In some cases, maybe you have an office that they come into and then you now do the interview there. I know some companies do that. Uh, Otherwise, it will just be a struggle with you teaching them how to use the tool, or you teaching them how to use Google Meet or whatever app or product you're trying to use to do the interview. Um, I will also say, and I know this kind of brings us to a different conversation, but another thing with user interviews I want to add is that it I know that virtual interviews are very common these days, and interviews where there's no video, it's just audio. But I think it's so important to interviews are not very easy. You actually have to actively listen. So you cannot be doing so many things at the same time while conducting interviews, because sometimes people want to make you happy. They want to make sure you're getting the information out of them, at least a lot of participants. So sometimes they're telling you things that aren't actually, or that aren't necessarily true. And it's not because they want to lie to you or because they're intentionally trying to redirect your information or whatever. It's mainly because it's just their brain telling them to do that and just tell you these things that aren't necessarily true. So you have to be aware and actually ask story-based questions that get out exact scenarios and stories out of them, where you yourself can glean whatever insights you want to glean out of them, as opposed to asking them directly. So if I wanted to know if, for example, I was working for an e-commerce company and I wanted to know what type of factors or what motivations people have for purchasing for water online, for example, like what makes them actually choose between different brands of water, and how do they purchase water, and all of those things. Instead of asking them, oh, what factors do you consider when purchasing water online, I would actually tell them to describe the last time they purchased water online. How did they find out about, like, what brand did they go into the platform trying to purchase? How did they find out about the brand? What did they eventually purchase? What led to that? It's just asking story-based questions around exact scenarios that they've done before, as opposed to just asking generic questions like, oh, tell me about the purchasing decisions that leads to you buying water or buying a specific brand of water. So I think that's one thing to know. I know some people have questions. I'm very curious, and it could be questions related to what Iwalola Lade said, what I said, or it could just be general questions. But I'm very curious to know what you feel like you struggle with if you've done user interviews before. And if you haven't done user interviews before, what exact question do you have around doing it, and why you need to do it or when to do it?
Okay, so hi. So I have done some user interviews before, and I did struggle with that desirability bias, right? So I want to know, if we're talking software, how does that, or rather, can you give an example, just like you did with that water situation? If it is like a software thing, so for additional context, I was doing user interviews to understand the problem with onboarding. And when I asked them stuff like, oh, what did you struggle with when onboarding, they want to come off as smart. So they do not say like the tiny little problems that they had, because they want to be seen as, oh, okay, this was not a bother for me. After all, this software is for learned people. So how do you overcome that particular type of desirability bias? Thank you.
First, I want to say that it may not be wanting to look like they're smart. It may just be that people, the thing is, with all the tools that you use, no matter how frustrating or difficult it is to use, if it's something you use often, you find workarounds, and you become so good at those workarounds that you don't even think about the fact that this is an inefficient way of doing this thing, that there should be a better way, an easier way. You just get used to it. So you don't think of it as a problem, right? Because I've literally seen people in different contexts will do something like, I'm like, this looks very stressful, but they're like, oh yeah, no, it's fine, this is what I just always do. And I was like, wow, this could be better. So it could be that. And in that context, the best way to actually see what people struggle with is to ask them to show me how you do the thing. Especially if it's something that already exists, you want to see what you should say. Okay, show me how you do the thing. Show me how you did the thing. If it's something that has already been done, and then you can spot the places where, like, there's an ideal flow that you have designed on your team.
Yes.
So you can
Yes.
spot where people are not following that ideal flow, and then you can ask questions about, oh, why did you do that? And or like you can ask them to talk you through as they do things, because but people often forget to do that when they're doing something. So you can ask them questions like, why did you do that way? Have you done it any other way before? Things like that.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thank you. That solves like a lot of my problems. Thanks.
Oh, I want to say something.
Yes, hi Miriam. Thank you for that question. I actually might consider a different methodology for the particular instance you described. So you say you want to ask people how they felt about the onboarding experience. Instead of doing that, based on like the challenges you experienced as well, I would probably instead want to just test. So I would get people to sit in front of me and sign up literally. I'm recording everything. I ask them to think out loud, to tell me as you're doing everything you're doing, tell me what you're doing. So they will say, I'm going to click this arrow. And of course, you know that maybe that arrow is not where they're supposed to click. I would ask them, well, can you tell me about why you clicked that arrow? So I would do all those things. So I would find people to actually onboard. I feel there you are getting like straight up insights. Secondly, I will probably also do a lot of like, I would have metrics I'm tracking. Things like, for instance, how many steps before I've successfully signed up. I probably would look at maybe other products, or if I already know like I guess heuristics that are like for the particular type of product. So maybe for instance, typically to complete sign up, it should be put in your email address and maybe do the Google sign up, and maybe that's like 2 steps. If I see that mine is taking 5 steps, I'm going to know there is a problem, right? I want this to be as easy as possible. So you could probably sit down with your product designers, any other person who kind of understands user experience, and you guys can do a heuristic evaluation just like together. And then also you can probably also track certain metrics. So like if you have a tool like Mixpanel, but I know not everyone has that, or I know Microsoft typically it should be easy to install, especially for like if it's a web app. And then you can track certain things like where are they wrong clicking. So maybe that you expect them to click a specific button and they're clicking in the wrong place, then you know something is wrong. Or are they rage clicking? A lot of times it could be maybe a bug or things like that, which you might not even notice, right? So there are UX issues, there are like engineering issues.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Thank you.
Yeah, very good points that you both made. I think what I specifically wanted to add is around the tracking thing. So sometimes people call it web analytics or product analytics or whatever. Typically, people have like analytics tools that they use. If it's a website, maybe it's Google Analytics or GA4. If it's an app, maybe it's something else like Amplitude or something else. But typically, you're able to see what people are doing. And I don't feel like people do this enough, because sure, user interviews are helpful, but when you're seeing what people are actually doing, it helps you know whether, okay, are there any gaps? Maybe people are saying something and then they're actually doing something else. And then you can dig deeper into what they're doing through the interviews that you're having, as opposed to just leaning on or being focused on what exactly they're telling you. So these tools are typically able to show you like how people, the exact flow, how people use the product, what exactly they are doing on the product. That way you're able to sort of understand better and phrase your questions or direct your questions better. Adiola, I know you had a question as well.
Yes, it is going to be a quick one. Actually, would it? I think it will. First question is there a rule of thumb for how long you should spend in a user interview with a customer, right? And I ask that because customers differ, and most of them don't like to be asked like lots of questions. So how do you I guess, mentally prepared to get the most important questions out, early enough such that it doesn't annoy them. And then the second one, which is very close to the first, is when you have group interviews, so like different customers, kind of like a focus group, right? If let me paint a scenario. There's a group of PMs, there's a group of customers, right? And you want them to commit an action, maybe go through a flow on your app. Is there a rule of thumb as well relating to how many people should be around that customer so they don't feel comfortable? Like, can 5 PMs just stand over them and just be looking, or would that make them uncomfortable? Again, rule of thumb. So yeah.
Who wants to go first?
If it's okay for me to go. So my rule of thumb, I don't think I've read this anyway, but for the first question in terms of how long, there are a couple of things, but in terms of like, I read years ago how there's like a whole study that was carried out, like when you were in university, if you remember, when you had, what's it called? When you had lectures, they usually wouldn't last for more than 45 or 50 minutes. And it's just based on that's how much time literally someone feels like I can't learn anymore. That's one thing. But secondly, I try to make them as comfortable as possible. Like the way I'll be offering you refreshments, especially if it's in person or if we're virtual, I will give you time. Do you need some time? If I see that, so usually with virtual calls, major issues are that, there's probably something else they have to do, right? So if it's virtual, I try to make it no more than 40 minutes at most, and then I also make it clear before the interview that this is exactly how long it's going to take. If you need to do anything, if this time is not good for you, like make sure this is a good time for you. Before you sit down, do you have refreshment? So you're not running to go and get water because you have been talking too much and now your mouth is dry. So basically, I just imagine I'm hosting a guest at home. I want you to stay forever, right? So I'm going to do everything I can to make you stay forever. I always make sure that I have food when I'm doing in-person interviews. I don't know, maybe it's a Nigerian thing. They will love you so much. Meat pie goes a long way. So that's one. And then the second question was rule of thumb about how many people are around you. I believe this is like, I know I used to read all these things a lot, and I will see if I can find them. I believe the rule of thumb is 2 in front of you. So one person actually asking the questions, one person taking notes. You don't want it to look like an interrogation, good cop, bad cop. It can happen so much. It can happen so quickly. So you kind of want one person to build the rapport, although sometimes you will see that maybe the other person who's not actively in the interview would realize where the person interviewing, like taking the forefront. So the other person might spot like a gap where they feel like, oh, let's ask the question. Now, it really depends on how you build the rapport early on. I know there are rules, but like I feel like making it a group conversation, making the person feel like you're teaching me, anything you say is right. We're learning from you, sir or ma. They would want to like spend enough time with you. So the rule of thumb is probably here 2. If it's virtual, yes, one person should probably be asking questions. If any other person has questions, you guys probably have like a group chat of the call that you can like ask questions in. And then if it's in person, I would say 2 in front of the person. So one person asking questions, one person taking notes. And if you can somehow do it where it looks like a lab where, you know how in movies now, you see there's someone in the room and there's like a 2-way mirror. If you guys have a lab, I mean, that would be amazing, but I know not many places have that. So usually it's 2 people in front of the person and other people watching virtually. So that's kind of how we do it for in person. So yes, that's me. But if anyone else has thoughts, those are I'll see if I can even find that rule of 2 thing.
Yeah, Iwalola is, I think as always, like with almost everything ever, it depends.
Depends.
This is why people don't like it, because
Researchers say that all the time.
Yeah. Study, it depends.
like, this is why people don't like us, but it does depend. Because I've done 10-minute interviews and I've done 3-hour interviews. So it just depends on the goals that you have. Who is the person? So for example, it might be harder to get a new mom to do a 3-hour interview than to get a student that is unemployed to do a 3-hour interview. And then if you're giving incentives, if you're giving really good incentives, people might be more willing to stay for 3 hours, like Iwalola talked about, even food, offering food for in-person things. I would say that for virtual interviews or any kind of virtual session, anything over an hour or max, if you are really pushing in 90 minutes, like 90 minutes is if you're doing activities in the call where it's not just interviews, where you're doing like maybe people are doing things on your Figma or Miro board or whatever, then maybe 90 minutes. But anything over that for virtual, I will not even be participating. God forbid, I will not do that. I should tell us more about the 3 hour interviews. It was more like it was a contextual interview. So we went to people's houses and we asked them lots of questions about lots of things. And they did a lot of like paper-based activities, drawing things, sketching things, those kinds of things. So that's why I'm saying that like it depends. If you're doing it in person, 3 hours is possible. And especially if you're doing things that involve not just talking, where they're actually doing things with their hands or moving things out or whatever. Yeah, you are.
No, when you're done, please.
Okay. And then about the observing, like, yeah, Iwalola said, basically, it's not too many people in the room. If it's a physical room, if you are doing it in person, I've done this same one I was talking about, it was 3 hours. We were about 4 people to 1 participant, and this is somebody's house. So just imagine how that would be for them. But try as much as possible to limit the number of people who are there physically. If it's online, then have fun. Because on Zoom calls, on those kind of tools, you can hide people physically. You can do like people, you can set the meeting that some people can be observers and they're not in the call. So it's just the 2 of you. Was the person? Yes, the people who were doing the 3 hour interviews were greatly compensated.
Another thing that I want to add, so Adela, you're talking about how like getting information out of customers. Sometimes I feel like this is actually a problem with, and I don't know if I'm right, I'm guessing it's customers in parts of Africa, maybe West or East Africa. So I've done research for a lot of audiences, and it's something I didn't expect it's not a challenge I expected to, I guess, know or get into or have, because I just thought very early on in my career, it was first global audiences and they were very upfront and open. And then when I started working with more, I would say, rural audiences or older people that are maybe underserved, they don't really want to talk a lot or give a lot of information. And sometimes it's just actually like trying to let them understand how, or trying to understand what benefits them or what they care about, and trying to phrase or frame the interview or the conversation in a way that also benefits them. I don't know if that makes sense. And there are different ways to do this. So it could be that if it's someone that just really likes to, maybe the product is something they care about, they just really want the product to be better, so that's one way you could frame it. If it's someone that they don't have a lot of time, it's just, again, setting expectations and just trying to make sure that you're asking the most important questions, not basic questions like, oh, what did you do yesterday, how did yesterday go for you, and just getting into the really, really important questions that you want to get into. And sometimes it's just actually making them a bit more comfortable in a way that they're able to share more with you. In some cases, for example, when I was doing research with some Ethiopian audiences, they're just very polite in that culture. So sometimes we'll ask them a question, like, oh no, it's fine, everything is fine, everything is good. And we had to like keep asking them and framing it in a different way, or framing the questions in different ways to keep asking them or trying to get the information that we wanted to get out. So for example, if we're asking them one question, we'll probably have different ways to frame that question, and eventually we'll get the insights. So as opposed to, what problem did you have with this, and they say, oh, it's fine, tell us about the last time you did this, how did it work for you, and maybe they will subconsciously mention that challenge that you're having, and then that's when you know, okay, there is a challenge. So I will say that we research as well, we use our interviews sometimes, and that's why it's so good to have your research objectives and what you want to get out of the research. But sometimes the best way to get information out is by asking the story-based questions, like I mentioned before, and then you going back and then reflecting and then trying to get the information out, as opposed to directly asking the questions, especially with people that aren't necessarily upfront or don't have a lot of time. Just ask for specific stories or ask for specific instances. But yeah, everything Iwalola and Lade said is true. I will say though that with interviews, I tend to do 1 hour interviews, but then I'll give like, sometimes there's a 5-minute break, or sometimes I'll let them know that, okay, we have a few more minutes, or I just have a few not as serious questions, or I ask the not serious questions. So the very early questions are not very serious. They're just normal background questions, and then intense questions in the middle. And then at the end, that's when I'm asking just basic questions that maybe they've been tired for a while, so they're able to answer those basic questions quickly and in a way that doesn't require a lot of cognitive effort. But Iwalola, I know you want to say something as well.
I can't remember what I wanted to say, but I think in summary, because now I have a question. In summary, you can interview someone for a whole day if you give them $1,000. So as far as compensation, as far as compensation matches, and I also think that if they are in like their own, what's that word, comfort zone, they are willing to stay longer. So just like how you said at home. So I've done, for instance, field studies where like maybe business owners in the field, people in their home. So you can tell that they would have gauged out more time for that basically. Anyway, my question, Hilary, please, if you don't mind, is have you found that people are, or that interviews go better with people when, and this is I guess I don't know the answer to this question, but have you found that interviews go better when, I'm so sorry, my kids.
I can't even hear us even.
Interviews go better or are more effective when you, like, people feel like they can connect more with you. So maybe you guys are of the same race or same, I guess you're from the same country kind of thing.
100%. And that's such a, because now thinking about it, no, actually, I've thought about this. I find that it's so much easier for me when I'm doing interviews with other Nigerians, because it's so easy. I mean, I'm from that culture. It's so easy for them to open up, and there are ways that I can just get them to open up. But then when I'm doing interviews with American, maybe Caucasian American executives, for example, which I've done a lot of in the past, oh my God, I struggled. I struggled in the beginning.
I haven't found that to be the case with me.
Really? No,
No.
especially Americans. They're the ones I struggle with the most. And it's because they, well, in some of these conversations, well, and there are different types of struggle. One of the main struggles for me was when I was doing workshops, just there's always, it's always the main American or top American executive that wants to talk a lot, and like, and then other people don't really feel as comfortable sharing what they think, not necessarily an interview. When I'm talking to them directly as well, sometimes they'll just go on and on about a specific, maybe they're answering a specific question, and sure, that's helpful, they're trying to help. But in some cases, or in most cases, you only have maybe 45 minutes because they don't have a lot of time. And they're going on and on about a response to a specific question. And you have 10 other questions to ask. And they sometimes, even when I try to stop them, they're talking over me. Again, these are issues I had earlier in my career, and now I know how to navigate. But Lade, since you don't have those issues, how do you work around them? And and I guess answering Iwalola's question as well, I'm curious to know your thoughts, because I feel like you've had more audiences in your career.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think I've had any issues with like people of, yeah, I don't know. I've known, because obviously done a lot of research in Nigeria, but then also I've done research in Kenya, I've done research in Germany, in the Netherlands, in a couple of other countries, and with people in other countries I haven't gone to physically. Like I've also done interviews with people like in the US, in France, like everywhere, and of different races and cultures and backgrounds. And I think the thing that has really just helped is finding, like, is that whole in the beginning part where you're doing the warm-up, finding something in common, finding common ground. It could be the product itself that is the common ground. You use the product, I want to help you so that the product is better for you. I've not really found that it's difficult to get people to speak. once you understand the context that they're in. So, like, if it's about, depending on what the topic is about, really. And also, there's obviously like cultural differences in how even within cultures as well, because there's also individual differences as well. So even people of the same culture, some might be more talkative and verbose than someone else, even though they have the same background and culture and blah blah blah. So it's just really knowing, and you already can tell from like the beginning, from the first couple of questions, whether this person is a talkative person or they are more reserved. And so it's just, and it's a thing that comes with like practice and with skill. Like in the beginning, when I had non-talkative participants, I always struggled to be like, okay, how do I get this person to speak? But the more you do interviews, the more you do all these things, then you start to learn techniques of how to adapt your question to get them to speak, how to because for example, I remember when I did a project in, when was this? This was like maybe 2019. And the people didn't want to say anything bad about the product because it's like a big company. It's like supposed to be really good and everything. Everybody knows it. Everybody loves it. It's great. But and when we're doing the usability test, they were like, "Oh, it's okay." They didn't want to say anything bad. And then I remember just like just telling them that, oh, that they should pretend as if like they're someone else and they're assets, like just find a way to get the person comfortable to speak. And like what Hilary was saying about how like she, in some interviews she had with some people of a different culture, was like they were more reserved, not willing to speak as much. But it's just to find the thing, and you have to push, like it's sometimes it's not immediate. You have to like try multiple ways to get them to start speaking. And it could be dropping the question for a while, moving on to another question, then coming back to that question when you've noticed that they are more relaxed into the session. It may be rephrasing the question in a certain way. It may be putting it in a different context, like, oh, imagine you were describing it to your friend, or just tell me like you're talking to your friend, or if I was not here, what would you do? Like things like that, just to put them in a place of ease, I guess. So yeah, those are some of the things that have helped me, I think, in navigating that.
Super helpful. I think for me as well is, and again, this is more niche type research where maybe you're doing research with a specific niche audience. So in a past role, I was doing research with healthcare executives, or I guess I had to do user interviews with healthcare executives in the US. So what I would do is I would actually research them and look at their LinkedIn and see exactly what what they care about, and just try to make sure I get a glean of their personality beforehand, so I prepare myself and I know how to approach the conversation as well.
Yeah.
And I think that can actually apply to other conversations as well, like researching the culture that you're going to interview. If you're interviewing someone from a completely different culture, and like Lade said, even within Nigeria, there's so many different cultures that we don't all act the same in some cases, and depending on what type of questions or whatever. So it helps to know what culture and know about them.
Yeah. And I think on the reverse side of that as well is that there is actually some truth to the fact that people are more comfortable with people who look like them or sound like them or whatever, because even as an interviewer or as a researcher, when I'm doing these interviews, I find that when I'm talking with Nigerians, there's a way that we talk, right? And it's easier to sleep. And even within Nigeria, being Yoruba, when the person I'm interviewing is Yoruba, I can say certain words that will like make them laugh or make them feel more relaxed, because I know the language and I can interact with them in that way. The research project I was talking about where we went to rural areas was in Ibadan. So being there, being able to speak Yoruba definitely helped me to connect more with them, because if we were trying to ask them a question in English, although there was a translator there, to help with facilitating that conversation, if it was difficult to like get something in Yoruba or for them to say it in English, it's easy for me to switch into just say it in Yoruba. Or even now that I'm learning Dutch, I'm seeing that also helpful when I do interviews with people who are Dutch. It's like I can just say something in Dutch, and that makes them more like, oh, okay, even though I can't do the whole conversation in Dutch, but just like even say one word. So yeah, there is some, I think that the two things are true. Like it doesn't mean that like, oh, they wouldn't be open, or it might be a bit more difficult, but it's possible to get people to talk. And then sometimes some people just won't talk, and that's just by nature how they are, and that's harder.
Okay, and I know there's a question here about incentives and how it should be communicated ahead. Well, I feel like MoneyPoint does a lot of incentives when it comes to these, whether it's interviews or studies. So I'm curious to know how that works, either at MoneyPoint or other companies you've worked at. Okay, maybe Iwalola is not here. I guess, Lade, do you want to take this?
Oh, you can go ahead. Then I can
Okay, okay.
want to add it
Okay.
on.
So I guess in terms of incentives, of course, I will always say that I think there are two is it debates, if that's the word to use, around this. So some people think that you should have loyal, especially if it's a product where maybe you only have one target audience, so it's just not a lot of people that you're targeting. You should have loyal customers in a way that, and you should develop relationships with your customers or users in a way that when you reach out to them, they're happy to help, and like you don't need to comp them. I know some people go by this approach. Companies like, I don't know if you guys know Buffer, I don't even know if that's how they're pronounced. So there's also like Sling Money. They have a community of their users. And then if it's a very early company as well, sometimes they have consistent conversations with their top users or superpower users. And so they don't really have to come them, because these are users that actually invested in product. They really, really care about the product. They really love the product. They want it to be better. So they're happy to help and do these interviews. Whereas where it's a large company, there are different audiences, then yes, I would say it's best to have compensation. Otherwise, it might not get, I don't know. Otherwise, it might be a bit tough to get the participants that you want to get across. There are different ways to do incentives. If you have a limited budget, maybe you say like 10 people get 10 people are random, or there's a raffle draw and 10 people get $50 each or something, or get a $50 gift card each, or maybe like you actually give each participant $10. And in terms of how it's communicated, there are different ways. So while you're sending out, the people typically have a screening survey for these interviews, because you don't want people filling out you don't want people offering to do the interview just because they want the money, right? So there's typically a screening survey, and I'm hoping that everyone knows what a screening survey is, but in case you don't know, it's a survey that helps you get the exact type of participants you want to interview. So you ask them questions, and the answers to that will help you determine if they're the exact type of people that you want to speak with. So for example, if you're trying to speak with people in rural areas, if someone selects that they're in urban areas, you probably not speak to that person. So in this screening survey, you just let them know that if you're selected, you get $10, or you get a blah, 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 whatever the incentive is. And I mean, there are tools now. If you're using Great Question, for example, there's a way that you can, after the interview, you just directly send them the gift card or whatever. But there are just different tools that have this feature for you to communicate it to them. In general, it's just through the screening survey, or whatever form you're using to communicate that you need people to be interviewed or people to interview.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think you have to think about your audience, and you have to think about how much time do you require of them, how much effort do you require of them. For example, if it's a 20-minute interview, maybe people are more willing to do that and you don't need to incentivize, versus if it's a 30-minute usability testing session plus interview plus something else, and then maybe people need more incentives. You have to think about who's the audience. If it's students are cheap. I'm a student, so I know.
Like, give me $10 right now. I could use it.
Give me 10 euros, I will do your interview. Right? But if it's a, like I used an example earlier of a new mom, like that's that she doesn't have your time. Right? So, or if it's a doctor that is dealing with 30 patients it has the 30 patients like 2 hours, or they don't have your time. So you need to think about like those kinds of things. Then, well, it's true as well that like there's a whole debate about like you have to build your audience from your community, blah blah blah. That doesn't help you if you're trying to do research with people who are not your users. So you still now have to think about how do you attract that audience? Some people like to talk, some people like to share their opinions. Whether you pay them or not, they will come, they'll be interested. And a lot of people don't have the budget to do give incentives to everyone who participates. So like Hilary said, that raffle, doing a raffle is a great way. It's like, oh, there are these prizes or this whatever that we will give 3 people who participate in this survey or who participates in this interview, study, whatever, and then you do the raffle. And sometimes people, if you just ask people, they'll say yes. Some like, don't worry about it, just ask. And then if you're saying that, okay, you don't just asking without offering incentives and you're not getting responses, then maybe you need to look at it. Can you reduce how much time you're asking of people? If that still doesn't help, maybe then you need to look at incentives. And of course, you always have to mention that up front. And also something to be careful about incentives is I've seen there are different schools of thought on this. So some people say give the incentives from the beginning, before the session starts, so that they know that they don't have to like say certain things or feel certain way. They're going to get it regardless. Some people say you give it at the end. Some people say, like, I don't know, there are different things, but you just have to experiment in your context to find what works for your situation. Iwalola?
Yeah, so you guys are getting free hacks. I wanted to add something. If you are like literally low budget and like nobody's giving you a dime, you have to go and meet your people where they are and intercept them.
Exactly.
Like, so you just have to do that. Smile, intercept them where they are. How are you doing? I just have a few questions for you. And then usually when you're doing that, you're asking them something that maybe would incentivize them to take the survey. So you're usually talking about maybe a problem they have, or are you someone who has this problem? If you see that they have a good reaction to talking about it, you've basically found someone to interview. It's not always the best. It's not like a lab. It's in a rowdy place, blah, blah, blah. But you make do with what you have, my dear, and you get good insights.
I'm going to look for the link. I have a thing about how to do intercepts. I will find the link somewhere and share it in the chat. But there's some other questions in the chat. Oh, Hilary, do you have any other questions that we should address, or we should just go in the chat?
So there are about 2 other questions. But I know, Iwalola, you said you have a hard stop, so I wanted you to just
I can stay on for a few more minutes.
Okay, that's good. So we have 2 questions. There's one question around what tools do you use for conducting interviews by gift, and let's answer that one first, and then there's one more question.
Before we answer the question, is Gift still here?
If
you want to provide more context about that question.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
I was just wanting to find out what tools do you use for like conducting your interviews in terms of also like documenting your insights and getting summaries and things like that. Are there perhaps maybe other tools other than Useberry or anything like that that you would suggest?
So when it comes to tools, I'm a tool agnostic person. I think it doesn't matter what tool you use. You have to think about your context, think about what exactly do you need, what are the limitations of your context, basically. So you could do Google Meet, you could do Zoom, you could use one of the other specialized tools, user interviews, all those things. There's so many tools. I think it doesn't really matter. Like, just think about what do these tools offer, what do you need, and where does that intersect, and then you pick it. If you need something that can do transcriptions, then maybe you need to spend a bit more money, or maybe you use Zoom and then you use a transcription tool like Otter or Firefly that you can add to your call and it does the transcript for you. There's so many things that you could do. So I don't think that there's like this is the tool you should use for interviews. And that's just me.
So since she mentioned Useberry, I guess she's actually talking about usability testing. Right?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I am.
So you can actually do usability testing without it too.
Exactly.
But it can be a little bit trickier. So things like measuring how much time it took, it can make the session even longer. So tools like Useberry are great. Maze is great, although I've seen that Maze, if the Figma file is too large, one thing or the other, it won't load, blah, blah, blah. I think Useberry does a little bit better with that. I can't even tell you what I feel like right now they're very competitive. Just like Lade said, whichever tool works, like if it's that, oh, this is cheaper and it meets my needs, do it. So both Useberry and Maze give you like a summary of the usability testing. You don't have to now go and start calculating a lot of things. Of course, doing usability testing, you're also taking notes and things like that. But in user interviews, honestly, any tool works. You can do user interviews with just your phone recording the audio. So if you're doing an intercept, you're going to use a recording device, and it's most likely it's going to be your phone. So there's so many things there, a lot of tools out there. If you don't know where to go or what to do, like ChatGPT probably has the answer in this one instance, to be very honest.
Yeah, like if you just Google tools, you'll see a lot. Like I can't even make a list here. There are too many.
Yeah, I personally find it overwhelming when it comes to tools. So I just stick with the basics. And also it depends on the audience as well and who exactly I'm interviewing or doing the usability test with. If it's an audience that I know that, okay, they probably it will take them a while to learn how to use a complicated tool like maybe Maze. I've used Maze in the past and it took us a while to explain how to use Maze. And I just stick with the Google Meet and then make sure it's recorded. And then you can always, to make note taking easier, have a note taker on the call and always just maybe have an AI note taker as well. That always works. Sometimes it's even, I would say I mainly just use Google Meet if I'm being honest. It's only when it's more like it has to be more structured for several reasons, and the audience is an audience that's well versed in technology. Then I'm starting to think about tools like Look Back is one I've used in the past. There's just so many tools really. If you look up tools, you see so many. So I'll just say it depends on what you need to know, it depends on your audience, it depends on what you have the budget for. A lot of tools are not free. So there's also that. One thing I did want to ask, and I know no one has asked this here, which I'm surprised by, is around note taking.
I want to say that like I've done usability tests with Google Meet and Zoom. So you can use any tool.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so note taking. Well, gifts, since you just asked the question, I'm curious to know, when you do these usability testing or user interviews, I'm guessing you've done them in the past, how do you take notes?
So we take notes through a Google Word doc, and then from there, when you want to like start mapping out the personas and the different insights and stuff, then you go to FigJam and then start mapping that out. So that's why I was also wondering if like there was a better tool that integrates all of that, because it also becomes very tedious moving from so I use Google Meets a lot, but going from Google Meets then to the Google document and then to the FigJam, I don't know, a part of me, it just felt like too many tools like to integrate.
I would actually type this into ChatGPT, type all your context and everything, and then see what tools actually combine all these. And then like you might see they're not, I would say there are not a lot of tools based on my experience that do all of these things that you mentioned. But I'm sure there'll be one or two that you find, but you should know that these tools are quite expensive as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
I would say on paper, there are tools who are built to do this, but this is why they say AI cannot replace humans in certain things. Context is extremely important, and the skills you have. So yes, there are two tools I have in mind that can actually do this on paper. So Craftful, Craftful, by a lady called Yana Wellinda. All you have to do is basically put in all the words and everything, all the transcription into this tool, and it does the analysis for you. But like I said, context is very key. Your CEO or your product manager can listen to an interview and get 5 different insights. You as a researcher can listen to an interview and get 5 other different insights based on the information and the knowledge you have. So to be very honest, I still feel that the old-fashioned way works. Yes, ChatGPT can help, with like thematic analysis, for instance. Amazing. Thank God for that, because it cuts down time from weeks to maybe like 2 or 3 days, right? Depending on how much stuff you have. But I would say what's really most important, yes, the tools. So I would say that, okay, you're using a Google Doc. A little hack that I've done is, say I'm interviewing a few people for one like persona. I would use a Google Sheet. I learned this in my like last job or something. I think it was even like someone on our team that basically talked about it. And basically, I put the different, so everyone has, like, let's say I have 5 people I interviewed. I put them in a Google spreadsheet, like a Google sheet, right? Their names on the first column, the questions on the top of each column, and their answers to each thing in each, like in the cells below. It kind of just makes it easier to look at it and see what's going on for that group of people. I don't know. I hope I've explained that.
That is exactly how I take notes. I use sheets. I don't do Google Docs because I put everything, but I don't mind the reverse. I put the questions on the first column and then participants on each column at the top. So it's questions this way and then participants this way and each person's responses this way. But I found that to be the easiest way for me to keep an eye on all the notes in one place and not have to be going from like doc to doc.
Right.
And even though like in my company where I worked before, they had like all the recording tools and everything, I'm just so used to taking the notes. And I personally just feel like taking notes makes you more familiar and more like, not familiar, that's not the word, but like more engaged with in the session. For me at least, I find that taking notes helps me stay more focused and engaged with the participants. And then also I can note that I can know where in the recording I need to go back to specifically if I want to find more information about something that I took notes about, instead of having to listen to the whole thing again or search through. I'm more familiar with the session itself, so I don't need to like watch the whole recording or read through what, even if it's an AI generated transcript, like read through the whole thing or search for. I know where I'm going to. I know what I'm looking for. So yeah.
I'm curious to know, Lade, how do you know? So when you're taking notes while interviewing, let's say you're using Google Meet, since there's no timer, how do you know exactly where to go back to?
Because most of the time, the responses are coming in order. Even though I have like questions on the side, they're answering in however order. I add new rows in between and just answers how they are talking. So I can estimate where in the recording that was, like where in the conversation that happened. So if it's like towards the top of the sheet, then I know that it was like in the beginning of the session. It's like,
Yeah,
I can estimate like that. But also I've been doing this for like basically as long as I've been doing research. So I'm so used to it now. I don't think I could do it another way. It might take me a while. I'm just so used to that process.
I also want to add that, yes, Google Meet is very naughty for not telling us how long a session has been going on for. But I basically just estimate. Sometimes if they say something and maybe I'm taking note of it. Maybe someone says Google Meet is very naughty. I'll put it in quotes and I'll say around 20 minutes in or something.
So, yeah, exactly.
To 5 hours of recording because I'm looking for one thing. Also, transcriptions help. So if you have a transcript and you remember a particular keyword they said, you can just go and do a Control F in the transcription document to find the word, right, that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just went out.
It's okay. It happens to the best of us. So we have just 2 more minutes before we end this conversation. But can we take the last few questions? So take Ernest. Oh, Ernest was just talking about tips. I think there was one question around books for, who is the person that asked?
Rukayat.
Is Rukayat still here? I think she's no longer here. But there are so many books. There's one called Interviewing Users by Steve Portugal. That's such a good book because it talks directly around the different forms of user interviews, even ethnography as well, and just things you should take in mind, things you should keep in mind. And there are so many things you should keep in mind with user interviews. It's not just like a one-on-one conversation. It's not, people always think it's just a normal conversation, but it actually is a skill that you have to build as time goes on. Does anyone have any final questions or thoughts they want to add before we end this conversation? I haven't really heard from you, Sola. So I'm
I
curious.
wanted to suggest another book, and I think it's free and available online. It's by Dave Travis. I'm trying to find the name. No, I lost it. But another book that is great is Observing the User Experience by Mike Koniavsky. I will put it in the chat. It's also a great book. Oh yeah, the free one is Think Like a UX Researcher by David Travis.
Free, really? Because I bought that.
Free online.
Oh, I didn't know.
I think it's somewhere on his website, or he has some free books on his website, so maybe I'm
Yeah, I
mixing.
don't think this one is. Okay, you already posted it. Well,
I have a
like,
question about. So Issa Rukayat asked a question: is there a book you would recommend that helps to understand user behavior, especially when it comes to product adoption? I kind of wanted more insight on that, but when she says product adoption, the first thing that comes to mind is Inspired by Marty Kagan. I know I can't stop talking about this book, but they literally have a chapter that talks about product adoption and how to do research for adoption. So you can go and read it.
she's no longer on this call, so, but I mean, now, because I actually have the book right here with me, so I'll go read that chapter again.
There's also another book. This is free online because I went to check it now, and it is free online. It's called Interviewing for Research: A Pocket Guide to Interviewing for Research by Andrew Travers or Travers. I don't know how it's pronounced, but yeah. And there's another one that's available online for free. I'm going to put the link in the chat as well. Yeah, those two are
Oh,
available.
what's the name of that guy that makes YouTube videos? I love that. There's a particular video that you posted when, like, on the is a Basic for Africa thing.
Who?
This
Oh, yeah.
guy,
I know the video you're talking about, but I can't
yeah,
remember.
I forget his name, but he has a video about interviewing, and I know he has great tips in there.
Yeah, and we're happy to also share. I mean, we have everything in the chat, but please, you can always reach out to any of us or all of us if you have any questions, or just keep joining. We'll be doing this monthly, so you can join next month and ask your questions as well. This was such a fun conversation. I actually learned a lot more than I expected to learn, from your questions and also from both Lade and Iwalola, and I'm sure they all learned the same. Do you guys have any final words, Lade and Iwalola?
Final one, the only way to get doing research and interviewing is by doing research and interviewing. So
True. Even if it's practicing with a colleague or something, please just, because when I first started, I was reading all the books, and it wasn't until I did my first, that's when I was like, okay, I actually know how this is, and I know what type of things I should be doing or what type of things I should be learning better now. So yes, even if it's a practice interview, just do it.
and if you
sorry.
if you can record your interviews, play them back and listen and see, like, oh, where did I make a mistake? Where could I have done better? Blah, blah, blah. Those things actually do help you in being better at doing user interviews.
Iwalola, any final words?
I enjoyed the session. I learned also Miriam's tip. So I know we always talk about like getting people to like mirror you, but I think I always have used that more in terms of like getting them to feel like good and what else, and then of course in the way I'm talking, but then this, actually saying, reinforcing, oh, I just did this, would you like to as well? I guess it would even make them even more comfortable. So I really enjoyed that, or I really like that tip. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And I hope you join us next month. This was a pleasure, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, or rest of your week. I mean, I'm waiting for the weekend already.